Okay, so we are recording now. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Jablons, and I'm excited to present this webinar to you today. We certainly have a lot to talk about with regard to things that are happening with the SBA and other things I think you can do strategically to sort of get through this crazy time that we're all in right now. I have attempted to mute everybody, as I said before. Please try to mute yourself too. If I haven't muted you, if somehow you're somehow sneaking past the GoToMeeting mute device here. I'm going to go through what I see happening right now, and let me preface this by saying things are changing all the time with regard to these SBA loans. We're learning new things every day. Things that were written up 2 days ago have changed. And so as you explore these options and think about what you want to do and that sort of thing, I can't encourage you enough to talk to the people at the SBA. They've got some local offices, and we have some resources too. I have a couple of people that can help you kind of navigate this whole process, okay? And it is definitely a process, and it's something you want to get a good understanding of and understand your options. I've done my best to lay out what's here, and I've actually had it vetted by a couple of people. So we'll go through all the pieces of that. We'll go through what I think also will help in terms of maybe some landlord negotiation, maybe some ideas about some things you might do strategically to keep things moving. And I'm going to say this at the outset as well as throughout today's webinar. Those of you that know me already and have talked to me already or work with me already know that, I'm sort of a glass is half full guy, which is really hard to do today in this climate, right? But for sure, we have to start thinking about where are we going after this, right? I mean, right now, we're in a tough situation. The president said the next 2 weeks are going to be like really brutal. Like the last 2 weeks were easy, hasn't exactly been that, right? But all that to say, we have to start thinking about what's May going to look like, what's June going to look like, as doors start to open again, how are we going to prepare ourselves? So, we're going to talk about that a little bit today too. So let me just jump right in here. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dan Jablons, and my company is Retail Smart Guys. I myself have worked in the world of retail a little over 40 years. We focus mostly on cash flow, merchandise planning, and inventory planning, but certainly this whole SBA thing and where we're at right now has a lot to do with helping people figure out their cash flow. So we've had to pivot a little bit and learn a lot about that. And yes, I have been on TV. I was Larry David's lawyer on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Most recently, I did a commercial for Facebook. So, I think it's state law here in California that 1 out of every 3 people has to say they're an actor. So, I want to make sure I'm in compliance. That said, I get to do both things, so it's kind of a fun thing. So there you go. All right. And also, before I go any further, let me also thank my friends at Dog Is Good. You want to visit them at dogisgood.com. They are a fantastic vendor partner. They are one of those rare vendor partners that really, does a lot extra besides just, providing products to help people. They actually are very focused on making sure that they get retailers as much information as they can to keep their business going. They have some apparel. They also have some gift items and some accessory items. And so I encourage you to look at their website and talk with them. They're really, really wonderful people. And my thanks to Gila and John and everybody and Tyler and everybody over at Dog Is Good. You guys are really wonderful people, and it really encouraged me to do a lot of this stuff. So I appreciate their contribution and their help to all of this. Okay? All right. So today I want to start by saying, look, we're going to make it through this. Okay? It's very scary right now. It's very hard right now. And so now more than ever, we've got to think about what strategies we're going to apply to survive. Okay? But, I think, independent retailers, part of what makes us so, part of what makes me love independent retail so much is how brave and how scrappy and strong you guys can be, and how amazing you guys can be. So, I think that's part of what we have to, keep alive in all of this. So we want to make sure that's happening. So I'm going to give you some strategies. I'm going to give you some resources to look at here. I'm going to give you some ideas of what you might do to plan. And certainly at the very end of this, my contact information will be there, although I imagine you guys all have that now because we've emailed a couple of times. But certainly reach out to me if you have any questions about this or if you need any help with any of this, okay? And again, I'm going to encourage you guys, as much as I'm trying to continually mute everybody, if you join the meeting, please mute yourself. If you see that you're unmuted, please mute yourself again, just to make sure that we can get, so that everybody can hear this clearly, okay? All right, so today I'm going to talk about three basic areas. I'm going to talk about the SBA programs, what we know right now. And by right now, I mean literally as recently as this morning, there have been some updates to it, okay? And then I'm going to talk about, some of you asked me questions about how do I deal with my landlord and rent reduction or rent abatement or that kind of thing. I'm going to talk about that, what I see people doing and what I think is an effective strategy. And then I want to talk a little bit about, thinking strategically in terms of how do we position ourselves the right way for when we reopen. Okay, so I mean, all of that's obviously critical stuff to, because literally it's not just, it's not just about how do we get through the next couple of weeks. It's also how do we reopen the store? What does that look like? Okay. All right, here we go. So I want to keep a couple of things in mind as we go through this thing. Okay, like I said, things are changing every single day. The legislation that put this thing together is 808 pages. 808 pages is just this first round of administration. I don't even know how someone writes 808 pages. Over the years, people have said to me, you should write a book about retail. And even writing a 100-page book to me seems daunting and unbelievable. 808 pages of this stuff that people are going through right now. Lawyers are going through it. Accountants are going through it. The SBA themselves is going through it. It's crazy. So things are changing every day. And so, as you think about what's happening out there, certainly any websites that have the .gov instead of .com for your business, right, or .net, .gov means it's a government resource. And so obviously the most pure information will be there. Okay, so you want to look at some of those things, and I've got some of those websites in here for you to look at too, and an email address for you to look at. But for sure, you want to understand that before you start talking to lenders and banks and that kind of thing, so you have an understanding of what the program is. I've already seen places where bankers have said things that are just blatantly not true about the programs, and so you want to make sure you've done some study of this before you talk to your bank, before you talk to an SBA lender. Or talk to the SBA themselves. You want to read what's going on there and make sure you have a good understanding of all of that. Okay? More legislation definitely going to continue to happen. They've already, what I'm already hearing from several sources is that, the $1 trillion that was put in there sounds like, wow, it's a lot of money. It's going to get drained fast. So you want to move quickly in this whole thing. I'm going to talk about that again during this whole thing. But they're already talking about what does the next legislation look like? What do we have to do after that? And there's going to be additional legislation to clean up what they didn't get right in this first round of legislation, right? So that's why I say things are going to change all the time. Okay, things are going to continue to happen all the time. Okay, here are some SBA resources. And by the way, I'm going to send you guys this presentation when we're all done. So don't freak out about I'm going to take a million notes during it. Just watch it, absorb it, take it in. You'll get all these slides when we're all done here. But one of the things that I was glad to see was this website, sba.gov/local/assistance. That's where you can find local SBA people to help you. If you have questions, that sort of thing. Okay, Lord knows they're going to be overwhelmed. I don't know if you're like me and you've been on the phone with like banks or other lending institutions or anybody over the last couple of days. It seems like you have to sit on hold for 2 hours just to get through to somebody, right? That's just part of the thing now, right? As all these organizations are way overwhelmed, I imagine the same will happen there. But there is an 800 number there, okay, for you to call the SBA, and there's also an email, and I found that email address to be somewhat responsive. I wrote to them yesterday; they responded yesterday, so I hope maybe there's something happening there. Okay. And again, I want to reiterate this, and I probably will say it a bunch more times during this thing. Okay, you want to consult with the SBA and or an SBA authorized loan broker. I'm not one. I do, by the way, have access to those, and so if you want that, if you don't have a great banking relationship, or if you want to explore another relationship, I have people that are lined up to assist in helping process some of these applications and getting everybody through all this. Okay. Here we go. All right, some of you are still not unmuted. I'm trying to mute you all, but please make sure you mute yourself. Okay, I'm echoing somewhere there. Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm going to start with this first one, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which is abbreviated everywhere as EIDL, and they pronounce it as EIDL, which the irony of that is not lost on me. But EIDL, there it is, okay? So here's this first one. Let's talk about this one, okay? So first off, to be eligible for it, you just need to be a small business. You have to be less than 500 employees. You can also be a sole proprietor or an independent contractor, and you have to be in one of the affected areas. I don't know what area is not an affected area anymore, but they put that in the guidelines there. Okay. Um, so most of you fall, or almost all of you fall into that. There are some other little tweaky kind of guidelines in there too. They ask you some questions like, the purpose of your business, and they want to understand how you've been affected. And, I'm assuming that pretty much everyone on this call is a retailer, so surely you've been affected in a lot of ways, right? But, you're going to have to talk about that when you do your application. Okay. Um, this one, you can use the funds for working capital, for some payroll, for expenses that would have been paid had you not been hit by this horrible thing. But it can't be used to replace profits. In other words, you can't say, well, in normal operation, I would have sold this amount, my cost of goods and my expenses are that amount, therefore my profit would have been this, okay? It is not there to replace profits. It's just there to help offset expense, okay? Now, they are going to look at your credit history. They're going to look at your ability to pay. They're going to make sure you're in a disaster area and that you've got these working capital losses are due to the virus. All that to say, they have not said what they're going to do about the credit history. And the understanding that I have, excuse me, from talking to some lenders and some lawyers and that kind of thing. I mean, I've spent a bunch of time over the last couple of days just trying to get my arms around this whole thing. Is that all the documentation says that they're going to look at your credit scores and your credit history, but there is no place where they've said like, okay, this is the benchmark. You have to have a credit score of X or better to get this loan. In fact, I think it's just a reference point because these loans are being guaranteed by the government. So there are some SBA guidelines. Most of those have been thrown out the window. The SBA used to have guidelines of things like you have to show that you can get credit elsewhere as well, or you couldn't get credit elsewhere as well, or some of those kinds of things, or you tried, or that kind of stuff. A lot of that is just gone with all of this. It's the really what the government is trying to do is get money onto the street as fast as it can to preserve businesses as quickly as it can. Okay, so they are going to look at those things with this one, the EIDL one, but it does not mean that they're going to necessarily. I don't know what they're going to do about credit scores if you have a bad credit score. I'm really not sure yet. Okay. Now, right now, the application process is super easy, but I think they're going to come back and ask you for some other things. Okay. I do believe they're going to ask you there's a thing called a Form 5, which is the basic loan application. They're going to definitely ask you for the 4506T. That's an IRS form that basically says that organization is allowed to ask the IRS for a copy of your tax return. Okay. I'm hearing talk of they're going to ask you for 2 years, sometimes it's 3 years of your own business tax returns. They're going to look at your last year profit and loss and your balance sheet, this year to date profit and loss balance sheet. They want to see what kind of assets you have, and they will more than likely ask you for a personal financial statement for anyone who has a 20% or greater stake in the company. Okay. The way that this application goes, and I'll talk about this in a couple of slides later, you can go and do a quick, easy, super fast application. And then I think they're going to come back and ask for some of these things as they go through. Okay, so wanted you to have this list kind of prepared mentally and start to put the physical, paperwork there so that when they ask you for it, you can respond quickly. I think speed is going to be part of the important thing here, right? You're going to have to respond quickly to these things. You want to make sure you've got all these documents in place ready to go, so when they ask for it, bang, you just reply and it's right there. Okay. Okay. Approval may take up to 4 weeks. Okay, and they say the first 25,000 will disperse within 5 days of the approval. Okay, that's what they're publishing. Don't know if it's really going to be that or not. We'll have to wait and see. Okay. Terms are a 3.75% interest. If you're not for profit, it's 2.75. Max is 30 years. The most they'll lend anybody is $2 million. And the initial payments I read can be deferred as much as 6 months. Okay. This one has no collateral or personal guarantee if the loan is less than $200,000. Okay, so as long as what you're asking for or what you're looking to borrow is less than $200,000, then they will not ask you for a personal guarantee on this loan, and you will not have to provide any collateral. Okay, this loan does not, there's lots of talk back and forth about whether or not these loans are forgiven or do they convert to grants. This one does not. Okay, it is not forgivable. However, there is the other loan, which is the Paycheck Protection Program under the CARES Act, which I'll talk about next. You can, if you get this loan, you can take what you get from this loan and roll it into that loan, and then this portion of that becomes forgivable. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a later slide. But so this loan, if you just got this one, the EIDL, the EIDL loan, it would not be forgivable. It does not convert to a grant. The next one that we're going to talk about does. Okay. This one does have this little cash advance feature though, right? There's a little checkbox. Literally when you go through the application, you say, do I want the cash advance? You check it off and then you get thrown into the pool, okay? It's an emergency advance. It's up to $10,000. That is, by the way, forgivable, okay? And you get that within 3 days of funding the formalized EIDL application, and the advance does not need to be repaid. They want you to use it to keep the doors open. They're hoping you use it for payroll. They hope you're using it for stuff like that. Okay. Don't know how that's going to be distributed yet. I can tell you that personally, just to make sure I was clear, I went through all this stuff also, watched how it happens, so that kind of thing. Okay. So there you go. Hang on one quick second. Okay. And someone asked me to repeat this thing about the advance. When you do the EIDL application and you go through the different screens that are there, at the very end there's a checkbox that says, would you like an emergency advance of up to $10,000? Okay. If you qualify for that one, basically they're going to fund it within 3 days of submitting the formalized EIDL application. And my understanding is that advance does not need to be repaid. They want you to use it for payroll and those kinds of things. Okay, so here's where you can get this application. Right there's the website for it, okay? It's a very easy, very short application, okay? The things that I remembered from going through it was you need to know your sales and your cost of goods sold. I think you need to know the date you were open, that kind of thing, okay? All that to say, okay, again, this is a pot that's going to get emptied quickly. So I would encourage you for sure, once this webinar is over, that you jump on that website and do this application. Okay. When you go through the whole thing, at the very end, they give you like a 8 or 9 digit number, and you want to hang on to that number because when they come back to you for other stuff, it will be there. Okay. All right. So, and I know you guys are putting questions in the chat. I'm going to answer those. I'm going to try to answer those at the end so I don't get too far thrown off. But just keep putting your questions in the chat window there, and I'll try to answer them all as best I can at the end. And if I don't answer it, you can certainly email me, and I'll get you the information as best I can. Okay. All right. So that was the EIDL one. Pretty simple application. Good for working capital, good for payroll, good for other expenses that you would want to cover, that kind of thing. Okay, 3.75% loan can take up to 30 days, 30 years is the max. There are other twists and turns in the road there too, a little bit, but that one you can go right on to that website that I showed up there and apply for it right away. Okay. All right, let's now talk about this Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. That's more of the CARES Act thing, and let's go through what that one means now. And literally, this one is changing all the time. I literally got updates last night and this morning before I even started the webinar. That tells you what's going on with this guy, okay? So first off, you have to be a small business like before, less than 500 employees. You can also be a sole proprietor or an independent contractor. You have to be in the affected area, and you had to be in operation and had employees on February 15th. Okay. And I'll talk more about that. There's things you have to do to do all that. Okay. Um, so there you go. Now you can use this one for payroll and payroll related costs. What does that mean? Besides the compensation, it also means things like if you're paying for vacations, if you're on the family sick leave thing, if you're paying for health care plans, okay? Payroll taxes are in there too. What's not in there is your payroll service, okay? So if you're using a payroll service, that is not in it. These are purely payroll related costs, okay? Also interest on your mortgages if you own the building. Rent can be paid for with this, utilities can be paid for this, and interest on existing SBA 7A loans if you have those. Okay, that's the main use of these funds, as best as we can tell right now. Again, some of the stuff changes all the time. Okay, so there are lots of rules about the employees. Were they full-time, were they part-time? And there are ways by which that they evaluate your employees, okay? And there may be some other SBA considerations here like they did in some of the other loans in the past. They've been a little bit unclear about some of that stuff. Again, this one specifically, you apply through an SBA lender, so you want to make sure you've asked those questions. You want to make sure that you've gone through all of that, okay? Very, very critical, okay? I'll talk more about that in the next couple of slides, okay? So, what are you going to have together to submit this one, okay? Again, I think it's going to be one of these things where there's a short submission to put you in the pool, and then they're going to come back and ask you for some other things, okay? They're certainly going to have ways that you need to calculate your payroll, and your SBA guy and your accountant are going to help you figure that out. Probably your payroll service will have to get involved in that too, but they're going to want to know the costs of those things, right? Like taxes, health plans, family leave stuff, that kind of thing, right? Then what are the actual salaries, both full-time and part-time, okay? They're going to want to know about that, okay? They're going to want to know what are your interest payments on the mortgage if you're doing that, or what is your rent, okay? They're going to want to know, are you doing any kind of things for, like, if you're paying any severances, any dismissal or separation stuff, okay? Healthcare we talked about, tax we talked about. They're going to want you to know, have some records of what your utilities have been, your transportation costs, your telephone and internet costs, and any other debt obligation you have. All that stuff is going to be stuff you're going to have prepared for them as you go through this stuff. So good time to sort of, check in with your accountant if you need that person to partner with to make sure you have these expenses pretty well understood and figured out right at the very beginning. Okay? All right. Now, approval for this may take up to 60 days, is what the SBA is saying, okay? And the application information was not available when I put this webinar together. I got an email today that said the application is there now, but I don't think it really is. I'm not sure if that's a valid email or not, okay? I did get an advanced copy of the sample application. It was pretty simple. What I'm told is that the application itself is supposed to be published on April 3rd, okay, which is Friday, okay? Some banks are saying that they're going to get it on the 3rd. They want to understand it, go through it, that kind of stuff. So they may not make it available to you until Monday, okay? If you don't have a relationship with an SBA lender, write to me after this. I can get you connected to an SBA lender who can help you with this whole thing. If you're with a bank and you've got a great banking relationship and they're an SBA lender, certainly you can go that way, and I would probably invite you to do it, okay? Understand this is going to become overwhelming for a lot of people really fast. I was on hold with my bank yesterday just to ask some questions about this, and I was on hold for 2 hours and 15 minutes before I got a person that just said, yeah, we don't really know yet, okay? So we'll see what that looks like, okay? Not sure how that's going to lay out quite yet, okay? But we are starting to see some sample applications. We'll see what they really look like, okay? So this is one thing that changed literally yesterday, okay? I was told initially it was a 7-year loan with a 4% cap. Now it's 0.5% interest that goes for 2 years, okay? Now, how do they figure out what the loan is? They're going to take your monthly payroll costs on average. They're going to go back and look at the last year of your payroll, average that out, and give you 2.5 times that as the loan. That's how they're calculating these things, okay? Now, you can also pick other evaluation times especially if you're in a seasonal business. If you're in a place where there's seasonality to your business and you add more employees for seasonality, that kind of stuff, they're letting that shift around a little bit. Okay. That kind of thing. Okay. Um, uh, um, so this is all changing. Again, I got an email, I think, from the SBA today. I didn't get a chance to really go through it before this webinar starts, but supposedly there's a short application that's there as well. I will follow up and let you know if that's a real thing. Okay. But I don't know if it's a real thing or not. Other people have said they've seen it on the SBA website. They've seen it on a couple other like sister websites to the SBA. They've seen it on the Treasury website. I'm not sure it's valid because it's supposed to go through an actual SBA lender. That was the last thing I saw. So we'll see if that actually is a real thing or not. Okay. This one, again, no collateral, no personal guarantee. And again, the requirement of being able to get credit elsewhere has been waived. Okay. Again, the point of this is to get the money on the street as soon as they can get the money on the street. Okay. Now this one does forgive, okay? So it's going to be based on the 8-week period, and you apply for the forgiveness through the same SBA lender, okay? They're going to calculate your payroll costs, any payments on interests, et cetera, all that kind of stuff. And basically, there's some sliding scales to this also based on, did you maintain the level of payroll that you had when this started, okay? So if you cut your payroll, if you reduced salaries for some of these people, some of the forgiveness will also be reduced. Okay, have to watch out for that. Now, here's another thing that's important in this, the last line, which says that, they'll forgive 100% of the loan as long as 75% of the loan was used for payroll-related costs, right? Not only the compensation, but also the health plans and the taxes and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so this one does forgive. Now, if you come up with a forgiveness amount, right, and you've rolled the EIDL into this one, your forgiveness amount will be reduced by the amount of the EIDL that you rolled into this. In other words, that's how they're forgiving the EIDL, by rolling that dollar amount into this loan. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And one of the earlier questions I saw that I can't answer now is you can apply for both of these. Okay, and I would encourage you to apply for both. You can always say no if you get approved. You can always throw it back, but you want to have your options open as much as you can. Okay, so the application process, my understanding from yesterday was that you had to go through your bank, or if your bank is an SBA lender or an SBA lender. And they're actually scrambling now to add more SBA lenders. Okay, and in that earlier slide I showed you, there was a link that you can go to find local SBA counseling offices. Now those are just counselors. They are not SBA lenders. They are counselors, but they can point you to where you can go to get an SBA lender on the phone. Okay. Again, this is shifting again as early this morning. I've heard from a couple of people that there are some websites you can do this application yourself. If I would get, my personal preference would be to work with someone who really understands the SBA and understands things they look for and can help you fill out that application properly. Your accountant may be great at it. Your banker may be great at it. Again, if you don't have a resource, reach out to me, but I wouldn't do it alone. I'd make sure that you were in there. Okay. That said, you also want to work quickly on these things. Okay. Time is of the essence, for sure. Okay. All right. Now there are some other loans here. Okay. I've seen documentation for a thing called an express bridge loan. I've seen a small business debt relief loan. There are other loans that are outside of these two, outside of the EIDL one and the PPP one. Okay, there are these other ones that are there too. They have different terms. I've seen as much as for the express bridge loan, I've seen it written that it was a 6.5% loan. It's over 7 years. It's a short $25,000 loan, right? Not like a gigantic one. Okay. So there's that one. Okay, the debt relief one, it can be up to $5 million. Okay, you have to be able to demonstrate ability to pay. You've got to have a sound business purpose. And there are other things that you have to look for in those loans, like you can't pay other debt with some of these things. Okay, you really have to watch out for some of those. Okay, now. And if you write to me, I can point you towards the documentation that I found on some of these other loans if you want those too. But again, if you're connected to a true SBA lender, which I am not, I'm just someone who's researching all this. But if you connect to a real SBA lender on this, they can tell you if you qualify or not, or how to apply for it, and get you through the application process. Okay. I think other things you need to know. So again, you can apply for both the PPP and the EIDL. Okay. Now, if you get both, you can have both, but you can't use them for the same purpose. In other words, you can't double dip, right? You can't use both of them and say they're both for payroll, that kind of thing. Okay, so one or the other, right, for some of those purposes. But you may be able to use the EIDL for some operating costs like inventory and that kind of thing, and the PPP purely for payroll, right? And again, working with an SBA person will help you figure out which one's the best for those, because you also have to assess things like, okay, well, these are great loans and they're going to put me back into some cash, but what if what does a loan mean? When does it start? What are the payments going to look like? And how am I going to get through that? Right? So, et cetera. You have to watch out for some of those things. Okay. So, as I mentioned before, you can roll the EIDL into the PPP. Okay. I think you got to get on this one right now. Right. So on the EIDL, I gave the link was in the earlier one. I would definitely apply for that one right now. Okay. On the PPP, my understanding is it's supposed to go live Friday. Maybe some of these websites that have the application on there now will enable you to put in like an early preliminary application. I will find out and I will email you guys. I'm not sure about that. Okay. Now, there's this other thing called Families First. You probably have seen some of that stuff. Okay. And what it does is it basically says that you can, if you've got employees that are on either sick leave or family leave, okay, then you are required to continue to pay them. Now you can use the money from the PPP or the EIDL to pay that, okay? But that means if you've got guys that are employed right now, and this is my understanding from talking to one of the lenders, if you've got someone that's an employee right now and they go on sick leave right now because of the virus, because either they themselves are sick, they're caring for someone who's sick, their kid is home from school, um, or they've been told to stay home because they've been quarantined, they can apply or ask you for sick leave. So this is why a lot of other businesses have laid people off and intend to hire them back under these programs to avoid that whole forced paid sick leave thing. Again, your SBA lender can walk you through that kind of stuff, but you want to read the Families First Act under the CARES Act and make sure you have a good understanding of that. It may be different in your region, it may be different in your sector, but there are requirements for paying down things like or paying family leave and paid sick leave. Okay, so you want to watch out for those. Okay, so those are the SBA ones that I went through. Okay. Again, you'll get this presentation as a result of this whole thing. I can't encourage you enough to get started on this today. That there's a nice big pool of cash, but that pool is going to empty fast. So you want to be amongst the first to apply. You want to get in there. And you want to start talking to SBA lenders right now. If your bank is an SBA lender, I would at least put in a phone call today, if you haven't done it already, and say, I'm interested in these programs. What do you want? How do we get started? What do you need to know? What kind of appointment do I need to do? That kind of thing. My bank was encouraged, they actually encouraged me to go into the bank and do an appointment. And I'm just like, you know, we're also supposed to be like 6 feet away from each other. Are you guys keeping to that? That kind of thing. Well, maybe we'll do it by phone. I mean, so you can see this thing's going to go all over the place. Okay. The sooner you place that phone call to your lender, the sooner you talk to the bank, the better. And certainly at the end of this presentation, when I send out this link, jump on that EIDL loan application. Literally, it will take you 5 or 10 minutes to fill the thing out and get that started. You can check off the box if you want to for the $10,000 thing. Okay. One question was, I only want the $10,000. I don't know if you can just get the $10,000 only. I'm not sure about that one. I'll have to ask that question. But I think, again, it might be the kind of thing where you put in the application, you get the $10,000, they give you the loan, you go, you know what, the loan's not for me. I suspect it could go that way, but again, I don't know for sure. Okay. And I apologize. I realize that I'm trying to give you some information at the same time telling you I don't really know. It's because nobody really knows. It's an 800-page piece of legislation. So it's enormous, and people are trying to tear through this thing now to figure out what this is all about. Okay. Um, and again, I encourage you to write to me separately after this is over. I'm more than happy to research some of the stuff and get back to you and find out what we can find out about any of these things. Okay. And remember too that in one of those earlier slides there was that email address to the SBA, and I've seen that they've been pretty responsive. Okay, to that. All right, let's talk about landlords and rent reductions. A lot of people have questions about this one. And let's kind of dive into what I think is possible here and how I think you should proceed as a retailer. So let's just jump in here. First off, I want to say this and be very clear about it. We all have to work together in this whole thing, okay? Certainly as a retail consultant, you might think that my whole thing is going to be like all, on the side of the retailer and all focused on like, what do we want, that kind of thing. But I think we have to work together in this whole thing. Your landlord has their situations too, right? They have their loans, they have their families, they have mouths to feed, etc. So you've got to think about that as well. And different landlords are definitely responding in different ways. I have seen I've seen all different flavors of what they're going to do right now. As you start to think about negotiating with your landlord, I think it's important that you certainly are not emotional and are factual. You've looked at your expenses, you've looked at where things are at, you've looked at what you have to do. I have found also that you've got to try to not be emotional during this thing. It's not helping you in the negotiation. It doesn't help you win. There are other places where being emotional helps in a negotiation. Don't get me wrong. This isn't one of them. We've got to be factual. We got to recognize that everybody has their issues too. And the main thing I think that both you and your landlord have to remember is that this is not a time for empty spaces in malls, okay? They probably can't afford to and don't want to evict you. And the last thing that they want is an empty space in that mall. So getting you out of there is certainly not in their best interest, okay? And it's certainly not in your best interest to be shut down and leave there. So let's not forget that, okay? And sometimes these negotiations feel like a poker game, I know, okay? But, got to remember the facts, got to remember that the goal is that everybody stays where they are and pays what they can, okay? So again, this is one of those things you don't want to wait. You want to start to communicate now, okay? And they understand what's happening now. They're not, it isn't like they don't know that there's these things going on, okay? And of course, their goal is to minimize their exposure, maximize their revenue. Like all of us have that goal, right, in business. But we have to be real about what can possibly happen there, okay? If you don't ask, you're not going to get it, and you got to be open and honest and start now. And certainly they're going to invite you to do things like look at your insurance to see if there's any disaster provisions in there. Some insurance policies have it, some don't. Some don't have it for this. The disaster, someone wrote to me and told me that the insurance company denied their claim because the disaster had to be a visible thing. Okay. Um, so I don't know what that means. Except that I guess someone's able to look at it and a virus is not a visible thing. Okay. So there we go. Okay. I would suggest that you send something to them in writing. Okay. You can start with a phone call, but make sure you write them a letter about what you want and how you want it and why you want it to be that way and why it needs to be that way. I have sent some of you a copy of a landlord letter that we have used over the years. Okay. And the reason we like this landlord letter is one of the things that I find that the landlords like to see is that you're not just asking for it because everybody else is, right? You're asking for it because you have a genuine, definite need for it, and that you've already done everything you can possibly think of to do to make this work. Okay. Um, so, um, I think that you got to show. Look, I've cut this expense, I've cut that expense. We're doing this. We're trying to do some social selling. We're trying to
Oh yeah.
do everything we can possibly do to A, generate revenue, and B, mitigate this thing. Okay, so all of that stuff is stuff you have to show them. Okay, and I think you send the letter and then you do a follow-up phone, and we're also suggesting a FaceTime phone call, right? The more face-to-face you are, the more human it makes it, and not just just shut down the request. Some people are telling me right now they're getting sort of like they're getting just sort of they're getting responses that are like, just a copy and paste. We're not doing anything, right? I think what you have to do in some of those instances um, is you have to sort of persevere a little bit. You got to push a little bit more on that one. Okay. Um, so that's an important thing, to persevere, to stay in the chair, make it happen, but try and do it through a FaceTime phone call is what we're seeing works really, really better than other things because it humanizes it. Okay. Now, what do you ask for? Okay. We are suggesting that it starts this way. When the store is closed, the rent is abated. That means that it's not tacked on at the end. It means we're not paying it. Okay. Um, so, um, I think that what we have to do on that one is just say that's what we want to do. And then once we reopen, okay, we want to pay 5% of sales because it's not just going to jump in and be like great when we first start. Okay. It's going to be a little rough in the beginning. Spending may not be where it once was and that sort of thing. So, again, I think it's important to tell people what they want. Okay. In terms of what do you want? I want 5% until our sales return to normal. We'll go to normal rent. Okay. That's where this starts. And again, you have to be sensitive to their needs too. But I think you start there. You try to get that as best you can. Know what you really need. Okay. Understand we're all in this thing together. We're all trying to fight through it together, etc. Okay. Um, I'm getting lots of messages about the landlord letter. I'll tell you what, as I send you these slides, I'll also just send everybody the letter. So don't worry about that. Okay. And certainly you will get copies of the presentation. Okay. So there we go. Okay. Um, Now, some other survival strategies I think you got to think about as we go through this. Okay. Again, I'm an optimist. Today on CNN they actually reported that the curve, everybody talks about the curve in this thing, right? Um, the whole curve of how many people are affected by the virus and the curve of deaths and how many people have died and that kind of stuff. That here in California and also in the state of Washington, the curve is starting to flatten. Okay, so again, the president said the next 2 weeks are going to be tough. They probably are. I mean, people are going to get heavy, hardcore, crazy amounts of um, cabin fever. And we're all doing the best we can to get through that. But there's a couple things we can do to continue to survive while that's happening, to at least keep some cash flow happening while this is going on. Okay. I'm going to go into those next, but just to reiterate before I keep going, so far we've talked about the SBA stuff. Encourage you to get your applications going right now. Encourage you to talk to an SBA lender right now. If you don't have one, reach out to me and I'll get you connected to somebody. On the landlord thing, start talking to them now. You can call them and tell them, look, we're going to have to start talking about this rent thing. Send them a letter. I'm going to give you a copy of that letter so you have it, okay, and you can use that. You're going to have to edit it for your own circumstances, certainly, but there are certainly things that you can do there, okay? And stay in the chair on that one, okay? Do your best to negotiate, okay? Know what you need and know what you have to have. And everybody wants everybody to stay where they are. No one's interested in evictions. No one's interested in losing their spaces. But here's some things you can continue to do. Some of these are things I've talked about in my last webinar. Some of you who have been there or done that one will see some of these slides that you may have seen before. And certainly those of you that are already working with me, I've talked about this a lot. Social selling is a big deal right now, okay? What is social selling? You're trying to sell product on Instagram, Facebook, etc. A lot of you are doing Instagram live events. I'm a huge advocate of that, okay? I have been to several of them. They are working. You basically tell people through your social media and through your email blast, you say, I'm going to be live on whatever day at whatever time. I'm going to be live for an hour showing you stuff that we have, okay? And the way you do that really well is you have got one person who's on camera holding up merchandise and talking about it, and someone else who's behind the camera kind of on the phone if it's Instagram, right? Looking at the feed of comments that are coming through, because a lot of time that feed is going to help, okay? Um, so you want someone behind the camera who will say things like, "Oh, Susan just said I want that," or Tina just said, save a size small for me, or I bought that before, I love it, I'm wearing it every single day. Okay, now is the time to get creative on some of these things. A lot of you are doing curbside selling where people can basically send you an email or e-commerce and you can drop stuff off curbside for them and they can pick it up and no one has to touch anybody. Please keep in mind that 6 foot distance thing. It's a real thing, okay? My father-in-law is a doctor. I can't tell you that how many lectures I've gotten about it, how important it is to wash your hands a lot, that kind of stuff. If you do some research into this, you can see that, it's a protein wrapped in a fat, and so washing your hands, the foam of that dissolves the fat, right? And that's why they're telling you to wash your hands so much, and by dissolving the fat, it kills the protein, and that's what keeps this thing going. I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm not a whatever they call those people that are experts in spreading disease. That's just what I've read, right? It makes sense to me, and I have a doctor in the family who can confirm some of that. But basically, that's why we're washing our hands. Keep that 6 foot distance. But you can curbside sell and still keep the 6 foot distance. You can send out boxes of product, right? So you take your best customers and you basically send them a box of what you think they might like, give them a couple of days to review it, look at it, and send it back. Okay. Obviously, not all of this is going to mitigate everything that's happening today. The Wall Street Journal, not Wall Street Journal, Women's Wear Daily published an article that said e-commerce is great and it's picking up and it's helping some people, but it's not replacing brick and mortar because guess what? It never will. But and we're going to have to reopen these stores and we're going to be back to where we were. Okay, we have to sort of navigate this next chunk of time that we can't. Okay, but in the meantime, definitely, you know what? Do business any way you can. You don't have to have an e-commerce site. Some people have contacted me and they said, look, I'm reaching out to Shopify now. I'm putting together a site, bang, 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 getting that up there so people can do it. If you can make that happen, great. If you can't, don't make yourself crazy. Send out emails, accept orders by emails, accept orders by phone, ship them as best you can, get them out to people, send out the boxes, and call your best customers and just find out if they're okay. Okay. It's interesting what I'm seeing happening now. I mean, obviously the difference maybe between me and some of you guys is that I'm talking to a lot of people every single day. I mean, certainly here at Retail Smart Guys, we are red alert, all hands on deck, helping people every way we can, right? And what's interesting is that as awful as this situation is, and it is awful, I would agree, okay? As awful as it is, the humanity is still coming through. People are still supporting small businesses because they know it is the heart and soul of their community, okay? So you know what? Support them, okay? We're telling people to support small business. I've always told people to support small business, obviously, right? And I've consulted on the large side of things too, right? I've worked in the Walmarts and the Targets of the world and stuff like that. There's nothing better than working with small businesses. Honest to God, I would never go back to that world ever, ever, ever. And the reason is, you guys are creative, you're smart, you're scrappy, and you're going to get through this thing, like I said at the very beginning, okay? Talk about you're a small business and, we're trying to keep the doors open and, remember when you came to me and asked me for a fundraiser for your kid's school? Well, now's the time to come back and help out your local community, okay? Show the product. People still have demand. They still have needs. And again, there's the cabin fever is unlike anything ever before, okay? I think you have to start thinking about now your life in terms of the next couple of periods, okay? There's now, right? I left March on there, but really, what is April going to look like, okay? If the federal thing is through April 30th, it may or may not stay that way, but there's still going to be plenty of e-commerce that's happening that way. Places where they're still talking about things like, well, the curve is better or it's not as severe, they may open up some of those other neighborhoods and some of those areas. I hope, that you're watching that and that you're seeing how that goes and watching how that affects your business. That said, now is the time to start to map out your strategy for May and June. Now is the time to start thinking about what your inventory looks like so that you can be sure that your May and June inventory is right, okay? That you have what you need to basically open properly. You're also going to have to think about things like, what does the promotion look like when you open May and June? Here's what I can tell you, okay? The department stores are going to go crazy cuckoo with promotions when they can finally open their doors, okay? I think they're going to go nuts. And so we have to make sure that we've got promotions that are not as bloodletting as what they're doing, but by the same token are going to entice people and get people back in the door. You also have to start to look at what are you going to do for fall, okay? And start to talk to some of your suppliers about what kind of inventory do they have. People who 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, told my retailers that they were in stock and are okay are now saying they're not. Okay, I've gotten that email from a couple of people. I went back to my uh, uh, retailers, and I went back to my supplier, and guess what? They don't have what they thought they had. So, guess what? I had to shut it down. I had to lay people off. I don't have what I'm going to have, blah, 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 that kind of thing, right? So, you want to keep checking up on that and making sure that you know what's going on, okay? So there you go. Okay. Um, I think you got to start getting ready for what normal is again. God only knows what normal will be when this is all over, right? But again, what does your inventory look like? Okay. Do you have a bunch of old inventory tied up there that you don't, that you need to figure out, how am I going to cash out of this stuff, right? Um, um, what kind of inventory do you have? What does it look like? Is it still sellable? Is it still fresh? There's lots to talk about for those of you that are in fashion, that the spring season is going to get a little bit of a stretch because people weren't in the store, etc. Okay. So you want to get your old inventory liquidated and get that done and come up with your plan for how you can do that now. And I can tell you this, when we get into fall, turn is going to be everything. You've got to plan your inventories. You've got to plan your sales and your inventory so that your turn is hugely important now. Okay, if you need help with that, that's what we're here to do. But you've got to make sure the turn is ready to go on this thing. And growth, by the way, that's going to happen, because there will be some growth that comes out of this. As crazy as that sounds, not every retailer is going to make it through. Number one, some of them are just going to throw up their hands and give up and just call it a day, right? And what I found in the last recession was that people even grew during the recession, as crazy as that sounds, because they were strategic about their inventory. They were strategic about their sales. They were strategic about how they plan things, okay? And they used that strategy to basically grab more market share as the marketplace thinned out a little bit. Okay, so start thinking now about what that looks like. Start looking at what your inventory looks like now. Start thinking about what you're going to come out with when you can open your doors again. What does that look like? Okay. Okay, so wanted to make sure I put these up here for you. Also, there's a link to my email, and we are affiliates of Management One. They've got a great blog going about the coronavirus, and lots of information about that stuff there too. Okay, um, and certainly I want you to reach out to me. So I'm going to leave this slide up for the rest of this while I answer some questions, that kind of thing. If you have questions, if you need help with anything, that's what we're here to do. We're here to make sure that you get through all this, and we get to the other side. Okay. And I hope that you think about this also in terms of, like, don't just think in terms of these loans. They're important. They're what you have to do. But you know what? If you don't think about where your inventory is and how you're going to sell and how you're going to open on the other side of this, how are you going to pay back that loan? You've got to be thinking about your inventory and your plans and how you're going to reopen to make all that happen. Okay. All right, let me go back and scroll through some of these questions that are here. And I've even seen some other things. So, lots of people are telling me that they're seeing now that there's websites where they can apply online. Okay. So maybe that does exist. I'm going to validate that 100%. I worry that it's a real thing, but one of you sent me a link that's actually a link to the Treasury Department thing. So I'm going to click on it and see if it works. Okay. But it does seem like that may be a valid thing. Okay. All right. So one of the questions: if your business was closed and you can only pay last week because of lack of business, how do you pay your employees? Again, the PPP program is there, and the EIDL program is there to try to help you do some of that, right? So it's also there to help you bring back the employees you may have laid off. Okay, so even if an employee has been laid off and is now in the process of applying for unemployment and that kind of stuff, if you get this loan, you can bring them back. But keep in mind, what the approval times are on these things, right? You apply, at the moment that it can happen, it's a month. It may be 2 months before you actually get that money in. So you may have to have them go on unemployment and bring them back as you have this stuff funded. Okay. Let's see. Uh, can you get more than one loan? Yeah, again, you can apply for two of them. And you can apply for those other ones I talked about, the bridge loan and that other kind of thing. You can apply for them simultaneously. Again, you want to talk to an SBA lender to make sure that you're doing that all the right way. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. Some people did apply for the EIDL loan, by the way, like 2 weeks ago, and found that their application is gone. Okay. It seems like from what I've been able to figure out is like if you started that application before they simplified it a couple of days ago, then you have to go back and redo the simple one. Okay, so if you did one before that, you may have to go back and reapply. Again, in that one of those earlier slides, I had an email address for the SBA. You can write to them and ask them if your application is still valid. There's also an 800 number there. Be prepared to stay on hold, but you know, you can call people there. Okay. So there you go. Okay. Someone's saying that you can go to the United States Treasury website, fill out the PPP, and bring it to your bank. That may be how that works. Okay. The one I looked at looked like you fill it all out and it may get a submission, and then they may route it where it needs to go. Again, I'll find out. I don't know at this red hot second. Okay. Again, I'm going to send you guys all sample landlord letters. Don't worry, that's coming. Someone here says my vendors have been getting more aggressive about collections, trying to improve their cash flow. I'm sure that's happening. Okay. I've also heard that the factors are getting a little bit aggressive too. Could be. Okay. Again, you've got to stand firm, do what you can do, tell them what the real situations are. Okay. As best as you can, especially with vendors. I said this in an earlier one, earlier webinar I did. Obviously, if there's going to be some short supply of inventory, which could possibly happen for fall, who are they going to ship? They're going to ship the people that are paying their bills. So you really want to start thinking about your vendor assortment and your vendor mix and picking out the people that you want to make sure you've protected so they protect you when you need goods for fall. Okay. Let's see. Okay, a question here about non-citizens, green card holders eligible for the PPP. My understanding is they are not. I don't know about green card holders. I'm not positive about that one. But if you have an employee that, let's just say you've hired some people, you're in the U.S. and you've hired people in Canada, you cannot use the money for Canadians. Okay, that's just one of the limitations. And the limitation is it caps at $100,000 for a person's salary, right? So if you're paying someone more than $100,000, the most that they'll include in the calculation for the PPP is $100,000. Okay. How they track that, I'm not 100% sure. Okay. Someone else wrote, what if the landlord is not accommodating? I think you got to stay in the chair and keep asking. Keep asking, keep asking, keep asking. Okay. Okay. Did I get all these? Let's see. PP's on the brainer. What is the time frame for payroll forgiveness? My understanding is that they're going to forgive 8 weeks of it. Again, the SBA will be able to answer that better, but that is my understanding. Okay. Let's see. Some people are saying they may be open May 15th. I'm hearing anything, by the way, from last week in April to up to May 15th. I think I'm hopeful that stores open then. Okay. Someone said you pay them even though they aren't working. If your employee qualifies under the Families First sick leave, then you would have to pay them even if they're not working. That's part of what that is. So you have to make sure that you understand that act and talk to your SBA, talk to your accountant. Okay. Someone else is asking, should we plan ourselves 40% down? What is my suggestion? We're telling most people to plan, if they're open right now, they should be at 50%. And then I think probably 60 to 70% of normal when they get open. It could also be that when you open, there is a spike when your first door opens, right? I believe this, that when doors start to open again, the cabin fever is going to be outrageous, right? So I do think there could be a spike that happens. Also, when things start to open up and doors start to open and people can go outside again without wearing masks and gloves and hazmat suits and all that kind of stuff, when that starts to happen, okay, what I think you're going to see is this. I think you're going to see that they're not going to go to the big arenas. They're not going to go to a concert hall, to a theater, to a sporting arena, because A, they're going to still be worried about it, and B, I'm not sure those are going to open so quickly. So the activity they're going to most have is retail and independent retail. And even if big box retail opens up, they're going to be more comfortable coming to your store than they are going to be to a big box store, because are they going to believe that the hourly employee at a Walmart is going to do as good a job of cleaning as you are in your own store? Probably not. So I think there could be a little spike when we open, and then there could be some softness as people trying to recover and get their finances back in order. Okay, but I think that's something to look at. Okay, um, Chris, let's see. I'm going to ask my vendors for a discount and pay the largest discounts first. Is that a good idea? I think it is, Chris, to the degree. Um, um, I think it is. I think it's a good idea, but you want to again make sure you've protected the right vendors in this. Okay. All right. Someone else writes, if PPP is forgivable, what is the time now to end of year? Kevin, I'm not sure I understand that one, so you're gonna have to. We'll talk about that one after. Okay. If you are a fall winter shop and your sales were cut short, yeah, that's a place where the EIDL and the PPP are key for that. Okay. Um, that kind of thing. Okay. Um, William, is a good starting point for PPP compensation your year end and 944 line one? I'm not sure what 944 line one means, William, but what they're on the PPP again. What they're doing is they're basically looking back 12 months from, I believe, February 15. Okay, and they're going to give an average based upon that. I think you can, if you're a seasonal shop, ask for a different calculation, but they're going to look at 12 months of payroll. Okay. Um, is it true that if you hire your employees back by June 30, that is my understanding. That basically when you do the PPP, you've got your payroll on there right now, and they're still on payroll by June 30. That's what turns that into a grant. Okay. William asks, can you include payments to consultants? I believe that if you consider that an operating expense, then yes, you can. I'm not sure that you can do it I don't think you can do it under the PPP, but your consultant can apply for it as a 1099 consultant. Under the EIDL, I believe if you consider that an operating expense, you can pay your consultants that way. Okay. Okay. Those are all the questions that are in the chat so far. So you guys have all of my contact information here. Again, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to package up all these slides and send it to all of you. I'm also going to, we've been recording this webinar, so I will be sharing that and send you guys all a link to it so you can listen to this again. I will send you all a copy of the landlord letter. And again, I encourage you to talk to your landlords, talk to the SBA now, do these applications fast. If you need someone to help you process these things, if you need someone to help you get through these things, please do let me know. And I'm here to help you. And again, probably the most important thing is that you've got to start to plan now what your reopening is going to look like. What does your inventory look like? What is your sale cadence going to be? What is your plan for getting your door open again once that happens? Okay. Again, my thanks to my friends at Dog is Good for getting me to do this and for helping sponsor this and helping me blast this out to a lot of people. Please share this with other retailers that you have. My main thing is this: we're going to make it through. We're going to survive this. It's horrible, I know. But it's going to get better and better and better, and we're going to continue to make things better for all of you. Okay. I hope this is helpful. Reach out to me, and let's look towards the future. Okay. We're all going to get through it. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions, and I will talk with all of you soon, I hope. Have a great day.